said to my graduate school professor, I said, I want to figure out how to make work like Reneke Dijkstra. I'm going to buy a light kit. I was shooting with a 4x5 camera, just like she was. And I'm like, I want to be the Reneke Dijkstra of dogs. And so
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 7 of Focus Stack Podcast. Just to kind of go through some of the usual YouTube stuff, I do want to remind you that if you'd like to subscribe to the podcast, it is available on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Also, if you'd like to follow the show on Instagram, I am posting shorts from individual shows, and you can see some updates about things that we have going on there. Also, if you're a photographer and you want to be a guest, we do have a sign-up form in the links in both YouTube and on Instagram. So please feel free to fill out the form, and hopefully we can have you on a future show. And with all of that out of the way, I do want to introduce today's guest. Our guest is Nicole Jean Hill, a photographer and co-curator of the Lora Webb Nichols Archive. So welcome to the show, Nicole. How you doing?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Good, good. So you're out in Eureka, California?
Yes.
Yeah. And how is it out there?
It's pouring rain right now.
Yeah, it seems right. Yeah. It rains there pretty regularly, right? It's like kind of like the Pacific Northwest.
It's very green. It's a big rainforest, so it needs a lot of water.
I love the Pacific Northwest rainforest. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I love it.
Cool. Well, one of the things that we like to start out when a guest comes on is just like to talk to you about how you got into photography and what kind of keeps you going.
Okay. I actually first got into photography when I was in high school in Sylvania, Ohio. And I got onto the high school newspaper. There was no photo class. And this was back in the 90s with darkroom only. And the school had a one-person darkroom. And the teacher, Mrs. Taylor, who was running the newspaper, just gave me a stack of VHS tapes and said, teach yourself how to do the pictures so that we can, have images in the newspaper. And so I kind of locked myself in the darkroom with the VHS tapes and watched them and learned how to develop film and make prints. And so it was kind of awesome because I just had a lot of freedom and messed up a bunch and then figured it out.
So the VHS tapes were how to process film and make prints?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and I wonder what they were. I don't remember the names of them, but she just handed me a stack and said, "We don't have anyone doing the photos for the newspaper, so if you're into it, go for it." Seemed cool. So then I thought that I loved it because it let me I was awkward in school and didn't really have a lot of friends and wasn't athletic or particularly creative in other ways. And so
I can relate.
Yeah. And so it kind of let me do all the things, and be there, but just be sort of on the sidelines. So I'd go to all the basketball games and football games and quiz bowl and music performances and plays. And then I would get to make the pictures. And I just kind of loved it. It was just a good space for me to be in high school. And then I ended up thinking that I wanted to go into photojournalism, but I didn't really know anything about college or art or photography. So I just kind of ended up at Ohio State University, which is where, most kids went to from my high school. And they didn't have a photojournalism program. They had photography through art, through the art program. So then it totally blew my mind. I started taking art history classes, visual culture classes, drawing, life drawing, 2D design, 3D design, and then of course my photo classes. And it was just my first exposure to that world. And I just took it and ran with it. So then eventually I transferred to art school and then have been doing photography from a fine art kind of perspective ever since.
Yeah. Oh, I can relate to a lot of your story, just kind of going to, I'm a first generation college student, so I didn't know how to do all the things. So I ended up going to a state school as well, and kind of going into photography from the art perspective. So cool.
Yeah. And I feel like super grateful. I had like amazing teachers at everywhere from high school, all the way through grad school that were, super supportive and inspiring. So it was just, it was kind of my safe place to be in studying.
One of the cool parts about, I don't know about, and for me anyway, it was like all of a sudden you kind of find your people, right? Like the people that are trying to find their way creatively, and it's just a great experience.
Exactly. And it's really fun, like just now I'm a professor, and like seeing the 18-year-olds have that experience when they come to school, and like the photo kids finding the other photo kids, and like the ceramics kids finding the ceramics kids. And there's just this whole thing that I can totally recognize, and brings back a lot of memories all the time.
Do you ever, so I'm also a professor, and when I look around the room, I'm like, oh, I know that person. I went to school with this person. Like you kind of see these sort of like traits that take you back.
Absolutely. And it's like amazing because it's been like, 30 years. And I'm just like, wow, it's just this, same. It's very different, but it's also the same at the same time.
Yeah. So do you want me to pull up your website and we can just talk about your work?
Sure.
All right. I'm going to throw it on the stage here and put your website link there. All right. So yeah, talk to me about your work. I see there's a lot to do with the natural world and kind of human culture related to that, but yeah, I'd love to hear more.
Okay, I guess let's kind of start with, since we were talking about dogs at the start of the show or before the show, if you could bring up the greyhounds link. I think that's under archives towards the bottom. I think that's a good place to start. This work was actually the project that I did when I was in graduate school. It was my graduate school thesis. I went to graduate school in North Carolina, the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And okay, so I was really into the work of Reneke Dijkstra, the Dutch photographer, portrait photographer. And I was definitely heavily influenced through school by New Objectivity, Bernd and Hilla Becker, Thomas Struth, a lot of these like European, German, Northern European photographers. And I loved Reneke Dijkstra's beach portraits. And I also really wanted to make work about animals, just because I've been an animal lover my whole life. And I was really interested in retired racing greyhounds because there were so many down in North Carolina. They would be brought up from Florida for adoption after their racing careers were over, and just they were everywhere. And so I said to my graduate school professor, I said, I want to figure out how to make work like Reneke Dijkstra. I'm going to buy a light kit. I was shooting with a 4x5 camera, just like she was. And I'm like, I want to be the Reneke Dijkstra of dogs. And so I worked on this project.
That's really, I'm a big fan of Reneke Dijkstra as well. And just so you know, my lights went out because my dog knocked my light over just now. But I think I'm just going to go with it the rest of the show.
It actually looks pretty cool. It's working.
Okay. Oh, good.
But if I think there might be some more on there, but like what I would do is like, it's very much like a typology where I would say to the people who owned the dogs, like, where is your dog the most chill? Like, and will accept me hanging around with a bunch of camera gear, and we'll just take the picture there. So it ended up oftentimes being like, just in the living room, on a couch, on a bed. And it was just such a big learning experience for me. It was the first time I'd ever used strobe lighting. And I was trying to very much get the thing that Reneke Dijkstra has with her color saturation, her light ratios, all that sort of stuff. But also working with a 4x5 camera, working with complete strangers. Like I set up, I worked through like a network of like a rescue organization to find people that were willing to let me make pictures of their animals. So it was like a lot. It was a lot to do with a lot of gear. And what I finally figured out was I just needed to bring an assistant with me, but actually the assistant's job was just to chit chat with the dog's owners so that I could concentrate on the thing I needed to do. So I didn't actually even need anyone with photo experience. I'd bring my grad school friends and just be like, can you just occupy the owner so I can, figure out my like light meter?
Yeah. And so these are all 4x5 film.
Yeah.
Yeah. These are nice.
Thanks.
Yeah.
They've been sitting in my closet forever, and I actually am just about to donate some of these to the Sequoia Humane Society because they have a bunch of empty walls in the dog kennel area. And
that's cool.
Yeah, one of my colleagues was like, "Do you have any work that we could, hang up there?" I was like, "I have my thesis from grad school."
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Greyhounds are such cool dogs too. They're so chill. Like, did they behave pretty well for you?
Yeah, there were some that were nervous, like, and when they get nervous, their nose drips with condensation. But so I knew they sometimes were nervous, but they were always just curious. And I, of course, brought like bags of treats, and so they were always sniffing my photo gear because I had dog treats.
Nice.
Yeah. But then if you want to go to, which kind of segues into like life after school, the portfolio that is the home turf project.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I really like this project. As somebody who's had a lot of pets, when I was looking through this, I was like, oh, this is really interesting work.
Yeah. And this was after school, and I was kind of having this crisis because I really wanted to be like taken seriously as like an artist. And I felt like I was going down this realm of pet photographer, which now I actually have no problems with. But at the time when I was like in my 20s, I was like, I got to be taken seriously as like an artist. And I remember like just being attracted to photographing animals. And I became interested in like animals in these terrariums and kind of like how they were like still lives. And going in, because I loved going into strangers' houses when I was doing the Greyhound project. I loved going in and being like, oh, can I arrange your furniture a little bit and set this up, and then make a portrait of this pet that was, rats and stick bugs and cockroaches and all sorts of things. And but I was like having this like, oh gosh, I don't want people to just think I'm a pet photographer. And I remember reaching back out to my grad school advisor, Jeff Whetstone, and like just having this like crisis. And he was like, listen, if you want to photograph critters, you just go ahead and photograph critters and just keep going. And I thought that's just the permission that I kind of needed.
Yeah.
So I was like,
so do you feel like that was kind of like the grad school, like I've got to be like tapping into the greater culture and how I'm doing it? Like, is there something about like just kind of being in that environment that was kind of putting those ideas in your head that made it feel like it wasn't as high art?
My issue about my work and feeling like I wanted to sort of be taken more seriously as an artist is that everyone had always told me that my work was very approachable. And I liked that. Like, I liked that people who didn't have a art background could understand and appreciate the work that I was making. But I guess I also felt like that was a downfall of my work, that it was like approachable. So I was trying to like, I don't know, I felt like I had to be more mysterious, or I don't know, something like that. And like the permission that I got from my grad advisor was just like, hey, if you want to photograph critters, then that's your passion and go for it. And then still trying to do something that was, in my own way, kind of making commentary about our relationship to the non-human and our sort of separation from the natural environment.
Yeah. So scroll through some of these here. Oh
yeah. This project was really fun. So I did shoot this also with a 4x5 camera with lights, and then they ended up being printed. They're like 32 by 40 inches or so. So they're larger scale. And then I would always give folks, prints of their animals.
Sure. Yeah.
Of course. And then, like, here's a picture of your rat. But it was such a fun project, just getting to meet
Mm-hmm.
different people and going into people's houses, and kind of like, it's where I also just again started thinking about it a little bit more like a still life, like still a
Mm-hmm.
pet portrait, but also thinking about arranging the environment a little bit more.
Yeah. So when you go to shoot these, were the terrariums and stuff in this kind of area, or did you move them around for the
They were
photo?
they were usually in that general area, but
Okay.
just kind of
Yeah.
moving a
Straighten
chair,
them out.
stuff
Yeah.
like that, and just it was.
Yeah.
I mean, and this was okay. So this was also like so I'm shooting 4x5. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
have a digital camera. I was kind of a late to the digital world. For my work, even though I had to build a digital program at school, I
Mm-hmm.
still was like, I'm not shooting it. But so this would have been like I was using 4x5 black and white Polaroids to test my lights, all of that. So just
Mm-hmm.
and the thing about, I
Which,
mean, this is my teacher voice here thinking about
yeah.
4x5. 4x5 is so great because it flips the world upside down. You really think about
Yeah.
composition. It really slows you down. You're not
Mm-hmm.
shooting 100 photographs. If I go to a place like this to make these images, I may be making 4 pictures.
Yeah.
So it was just such a amazing learning experience for me, a continual learning experience.
So that black and white Polaroid, was that the Type 55 where you get the negative and the positive?
Type 54, where
Oh,
you just,
54. Okay. Oh,
yeah,
okay. Cool. I always like that stuff. It's so you can't get it anymore.
it was so expensive.
It's so expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
it's fun because I still find the Polaroids like hidden in my like camera gear, like
Oh,
from like,
nice.
oh, sure, so fun.
Oh, look at that goldfish. Growing up, I've had a lot of like reptiles and things like that, and just like my bedroom when I was a kid was just full of terrariums, so I can relate to a lot of this.
Yeah, this was such a fun project to work on. Also, just
Yeah.
like things that like for that frog that you just went
Oh
by,
yeah, yeah.
learning how
That's a
to
African
photograph.
bullfrog, right?
Yes, learning how to do glass.
Mhm.
This has come in handy for like commercial work, like having to do portraits where you have no choice but be in front of a big glass window, and just learning how
Mhm.
to like set up the strobes for that. It was just like, okay, I'm gonna store that little,
Yeah.
gem in my head so I can pull that out later. So it's just a lot of things like that that were just I love like just those little things that you pick up as you go when you're shooting.
Yeah. Definitely. Oh, little tortoise.
Yeah. And then the other project that kind of like leads into this, even though you would never guess it, because we're going to jump to something way different. On my
Okay.
site, if you go to the mixed martial arts,
Oh, yeah.
so you want to fight. So this is like, it feels like now for something completely different. But in a way, this was so the reason I sort of did this project was that it's not exactly, I mean, it's later work, but it's not exactly chronological order. I was doing a lot of landscape work
Mhm.
between a lot of the critters and this. But what happened with this work is that I ended up actually having to have a bunch of knee surgeries, and I
Mm.
wasn't able to carry like all the lights and the photo gear and like go out into different places. And so I had to kind of figure out something that I could do where I could just sort of sit
Mhm.
and photograph. And what you might not know about the Eureka area is that it is a hotbed of MMA
Hmm.
culture. Has a lot to do with the fact that there's a lot of federally recognized tribes up here, and so they
Mhm.
can do these amateur sporting events that don't exactly have to follow the same rules if they weren't on tribal land. So they
Mhm.
can fight without the same kind of gear on. So it
Mm.
sort of just randomly, I met someone who was a former printmaker who had an art degree, who decided to take his graduation money and buy an octagon and like cage and start
Mhm.
an MMA gym. So
Wow.
he was like, I had sort of just been kind of interested in it because I'd been having all this like physical therapy and doing all this stuff. And I was like, what's the deal with this fight culture up here? And so I met this mutual, like a friend of a friend, and he was like, yeah, if you want to come to the gym anytime, and it'd be cool to have like a photo professor there. And he just gave me all access to shooting the MMA practices, the MMA events. It's also boxing and Muay Thai, but mostly MMA.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was actually the first time I actually really started working with digital photography, because it just, I was physically incapable of doing this stuff with the 4x5.
Yeah.
And the thing that was interesting for me that I just realized more in hindsight is that my work as a 4x5 photographer really informed the way I used the digital camera.
Oh, sure.
So I was still oftentimes like, I'm shooting with lights, but I'm shooting this time with a Q flash, and I kind of had this rig set up where I could just put it on a little tripod or an extension. And then oftentimes I'm still shooting with a tripod with a lot of this work, even though it sometimes feels more handheld. But I wasn't going to these events and shooting like most sports photographers, like 2,000 images. I'm still like thinking in my head like a 4x5 photographer shooting only like a small handful of them. And I think it actually does sort of then inform the way that this work looks. That makes sense.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and scroll through some of these, but I shoot a lot of professional wrestling, which is like predetermined, you know. But spoiler alert, I hope I didn't just crush anybody's ideas of professional wrestling, but it's a lot of fun to shoot. I love shooting, but these guys are actually, they're hurting themselves. They're hurting each other, I should say.
They are, but what's kind of interesting and what I became so fascinated with is how they really want someone to be as good as they are, so that they're not actually hurting each other that much. And if they're equally skilled, it's more like chess. I mean, kind of like with boxing too. Like you're pushing forward and you're pulling back, and it's a lot about strategy. So I just became really interested in it. And one of my big inspirations for this work is the work of the artist Collier Shore, who also did like physical wrestling work, and the way she talks about it. And, you know, it was just kind of interesting to be in this very like macho space, and then being this like, you know, just very unintimidating woman coming in with like, you know, a knee brace, multiple knee braces, like sometimes a cane, and being like, can I take your picture? And the way that they would like perform for my camera was just, I feel like a little very different from the way that they would perform for other photographers there on the sidelines.
So this is during a match here?
Yeah. So I would also go and do the events, and there were different ones. There's ones where they were more trained up in their sport, and ones where they were more amateur, very amateur level. So it was like all levels of it. And and also some of the photographs are just from the practices and stuff like that, which I really loved going to. That's my colleague Dave Woody holding the Q flash there in the right side of that image.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's very different from most of the work that I do, but it was I shot with this group of people for up until the pandemic, and then I sort of stopped because you can get kind of messy with like blood and stuff.
Yeah, sure. I was looking through this earlier. There was one photo, like this kid right here, this little gorilla singlet. That's amazing.
Yeah. I just found that community so interesting to hang out with, and I still talk to the guy who first connected me with it. And he's interesting because he's an artist way of thinking, but he's also this like MMA promoter. So he's just, when you look at things through like an artist lens, it's like just a little bit more detached, and we sort of like sit back and sort of talk about the and I don't know, just like talk about the experience in a more abstract visual way. And he kind of loves it because normally he's just talking with the fighters about like their, weight or their, skills at combat. And so it was fun to be able to just have these conversations about like form and shape and things like that. It's great.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, this work is so different from most everything else in your portfolio. And when I saw that, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I wasn't sure if we were going to talk about it or not, but I'm glad that you kind of talked about how it tied into how you shot with the 4x5.
Yeah. And I actually I'm not shooting this work now, but I'm actually trying to figure out ways to do work that's actually more textile based, like embroidery and tapestry that's related to some of these photographs. And I've also recently, this is a weird tangent, and I can't believe I'm bringing this up. I've also really gotten into like NFL football and like kind of really interested in the way that the body works and kind of trying to find ways to like approach that through a visual arts lens, but trying to move a little away from photography for it.
Oh,
Just
interesting.
be experimental,
Yeah.
Different.
Oh, cool. Well, hopefully we'll get to see some of that work in the future.
Yeah. And I'm using like a lot of pictures as kind of like the source materials.
Okay. Interesting. Would you like me to go anywhere else in the portfolio?
I guess maybe just quickly we can talk about, because I know we also want to talk about the Lora Webb Nichols Archive, but maybe I can just talk a little bit about some of the more recent work. So just the Habitat one, which is the owl picture.
Yeah.
So kind of going back to my love of photographing critters, I decided to try to take advantage of what I have surrounding me, which is I work at Cal Poly Humboldt, teach at the university here in Humboldt County. It's a really big wildlife school. There's a lot of folks that are doing work with animals, wild animals, tracking them by catching them and putting on tracking devices in a wide range of technology. So this could be bird banding, where they're just putting on, the little cuffs around their feet, or it can be like more high-tech stuff with little like Bluetooth or satellite little GPS units. And I just was like thinking, I was more physically able-bodied by that point. And I was like, oh, I would like to go out in the field and see what it's like to watch folks catch animals. So I started this work 2019, 2022, like up until the pandemic. And that was just, I was really interested in the way that people could look at these animals so scientifically and objectively, but the way that the scientists studying the animals had this deep love for the species that they were studying. Like the way like someone could talk about a barn owl or a hoary bat or a porcupine in a way that was both incredibly informed and detailed, but then just have these moments where they would just seem awestruck by the animal. It was a fun experience. So I actually can't remember what's in this portfolio because it's still kind of new. Like, I haven't shown it much.
Okay.
Oh, so yeah, it's both that's the hoary bat right there. Both the pictures of the animals, but also the environment in which they were in. So my experience of like hanging out with a bunch of scientists and seeing the way that they track an animal and they talk about the landscape was fascinating to me as someone who's just, I live in a very beautiful natural environment surrounded by a lot of state and national parks and things like that. Spend a lot of time hiking and things. But being in those same spaces with someone who's looking for a porcupine or someone who's looking for a bat or all these other animals was just like a totally different way of seeing things for me. And so that is the more recent work. And then Yeah, so it kind of goes back and forth between the images of the animals and the scientists encountering them, and then the
Mhm.
encounters of the landscape as we are looking for the animals,
Yeah.
and tracking them and seeing evidence of their uh, how they've made an imprint into
Mm.
space.
So this is where an animal was laying down or something? Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that would probably I think that was in Wyoming, and that's probably a mule deer
Yeah.
because we're tracking with a group of folks tracking mule deer. So
Oh, cool.
um, yeah, so it's been a really informative project for me, just in terms of the way of like reading landscape in a new way, but then also having these really cool experiences of like hanging out with people, catching these
Yeah.
animals.
So it seems like your work kind of gives you an opportunity to kind of like jump into someone else's world, and it seems like you kind of enjoy that just based on how you've talked about the projects so far. Like
Yeah,
it's kind of it's exciting, right?
I totally love it. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying at the beginning about like being in high
Mm-hmm.
school and like
Mm-hmm.
going to all the things, but not actually having to do all the things, but
Right. Yeah.
being there and experiencing it. I think it's awesome. And it's
Yeah.
great. And because I'm not
I
a photojournalist, I can decide what it is I want to do. It's my
yeah.
choice.
Yeah. Yeah. I can relate to that so much.
Mhm.
Cool.
And then I guess just real quickly, because I said I did grab some objects, the portfolio that is just to kind of show where this is sort of more recently landed, the one that's the 47 bird nest pieces from the
Yes.
Iowa prairie. So in the process of doing this, the animal work with wildlife and tracking animals, I started to just collect objects that were sort of detritus from animals out in the landscape. And this is one that I think this is kind of the most recent work, even that I've been most interested in. I was taking birds' nests that had been abandoned or like fallen out of trees, taking them
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of pulling them apart,
Mm-hmm.
looking at the individual pieces, sort of just thinking about like a bird, imagining a bird, like curating each piece, almost like a
Mm-hmm.
museum, but then forming it into this nest and finding just these really interesting objects, these little twigs and
Mm-hmm.
pieces of grass. And also thinking what inspired it was I had my dog Pearl, who was my Jack Russell I had for 17 years, passed away in 2019, and I found a hummingbird nest made of her dog hair in the backyard
Mm.
like a year later. And I was really thinking about how the birds are, that in my yard are using the material from the yard and just thinking about that. And I thought that was interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I photographed all these deconstructed birds' nests, and I still have a bunch of those. And I'm not totally sure what I'm going to do with the photographs, but I've started to make these like little like it's kind of hard to see and it's kind of hard to put
Mm-hmm.
on the site, but they're just like the individual birds' nests, and then they're mounted to plexi and then resin
Yeah.
and making these little like jewel like things to start to just play around with the way that the images are displayed a little bit differently.
I'm gonna try to zoom in here.
Yeah, so that's the installation shot, and that was just from the one bird's nest from Iowa, from the tallgrass prairie.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
Yeah.
that's
I,
kind of the most recent stuff.
yeah. I was looking through these earlier, and I think it's really interesting to kind of see them as like little like the bird curated these pieces of their home. Yeah, it's similar to how people have their homes in the greyhound photos, and the way people put their pets in the. And I can see a lot of connection between all of that work. And that I think these are probably really. I mean, I haven't seen them in real life other than just right here, but they look like they'd be really pretty objects.
Yeah, they're just like little, like it's candy. It's just like I don't know.
Yeah,
I got really into resin coating, so I'm like now just
yeah,
want and everything, but it does kind of just look like yeah, little
and
candies.
yeah. I like the kind of hard light that you're using on it too, because it kind of like particularly in this first one, I
Mhm.
really enjoyed. It's almost like a contour drawing,
Yeah.
in the way that the stick, the little twig and the shadow are working together.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was just, it was just like this, just magical thing where I just started to be like in the studio being like, what else can I do with this stuff? And, I want to make some work about it and I don't know what to do. And then I just flopped it down on a piece of foam board and I was like, oh, that's visually quite striking and yet very simple.
All
But yeah,
right.
now if we want to talk about I know we said about half and half, and then I just was like,
Oh yeah, sure.
about animals. But if you want to pop on the Lora Webb Nichols, I can.
Should I go through your website or go to the Lora Webb Nichols
Let's
Archive
do the
website?
Lora Webb Nichols website.
Okay, and then let's switch over here. There we go.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. So tell me about this. I don't know a lot about Lora Webb Nichols.
So when I was out making the work that I make with the animal stuff and landscape stuff, I was doing an artist residency program in Saratoga, Wyoming. This was back in 2012. And there's a place near there called the Grand Encampment Museum. And the Grand Encampment Museum sort of advertised on their website that they held the archive of a female photographer who made 24,000 images starting in 1899. Just from what I know about the history of photography, I was like, that seems like a really big amount of pictures from, especially from a female photographer, especially from rural Wyoming. It just didn't add up. So I went back a year later to kind of investigate a little bit more, and I found out about Lora Webb Nichols and spent about a week there, and then realized that the work wasn't really publicly accessible. They had the negatives there, but there wasn't any way to view it. So I kind of worked with the next of kin and of Lora Webb Nichols, and spent time collaborating with the museum to just make it publicly available. So they had sort of started the process, a woman named Nancy Anderson and her husband in the 90s, scanning all of the 24,000 negatives, but then they were just kind of like living on these like old DVD RAM discs. And so there was like a lot of work that just like, I didn't know anything about her either at that point. I just knew the basics. Like there's a bunch of negatives and she was a woman and she started making pictures in 1899 at the age of 16. And it was around the same time. I was 16 when I started making pictures, and I was like, I wonder what Wyoming in 1899 looked like compared to like Sylvania, Ohio in the 1990s. And so I just spent a decade basically making this available. So I run the website here, which is just like a kind of just to get your feet wet of Lora Webb Nichols' work. But then if you also follow the visit the collection link on the left, it will eventually take you to the American Heritage Center, where you can actually view, which American Heritage Center is part of the University of Wyoming. You can view the entire archive, the entire 24,000. But for most people,
should I click that? Oh, I didn't know if you want me to click it.
Click to no, because that would just be not look very interesting. Okay. So click on instead, like for example, like the early images link. So, and this one, I think somehow you can kind of scroll through some of the pictures if you click on that first one. Yeah. So I'll just kind of explain. So the reason I was like, I wouldn't go to the American Heritage Center website now is because if you go to that website, it is like a archive that's meant for researchers. That's not exactly curated in any way. It's just like, go search for something. Go. And it doesn't really have, unless you know what you're looking for, you're gonna see like a lot of not very interesting images or really underexposed or overexposed. It's like the raw archive.
Gotcha.
So what I do is I create the entry point through which people can kind of understand a little bit more about Lora without having to be a researcher going through 24,000 pictures.
Should I cycle through some of these?
Sure, that would be great. Yeah. And
look at that.
Yeah, her work is amazing. She photographed everything. So she she was like the photographer in town for her time in encampment. So she would be hired to do like photographs of industrial copper mining stuff and things like that. But she was a 16-year-old girl. She was married right around that time then as well. So starting a family very young. And she was just photographing the things that brought her joy. So her family, her dogs, her neighbors. That was her first husband, who was much older than her. He was a miner. And it's a really interesting archive because it shows the vision of the American West from a very female perspective through photography. And it's really there's other archives kind of like it, like Evelyn Cameron up in Montana around the same time. But with the amount of images that Lora made, you really delve into very intimate photographs.
Yeah, I love this one. This one, like this kid right here that's amazing.
Yeah, it's a really special archive. And I mean, I think people are sort of like, well, how did I get anything to do with it? Because I'm sort of like this professor living in California. This is an archive based in a very rural town in Wyoming, but I just knew that there was something special to kind of unpack with this, and just wanting to make it as publicly available as possible. That is the family homestead, Willow Glen. So her father was a homesteader who moved to Wyoming to start ranching from Colorado. Originally, the family was from Boulder. And that homestead is still there. It still very much looks a lot like it did back in 1906. This was made.
This is a really interesting environmental portrait. Like it's using the trees as the framing device, and it'd be fun to photograph this from that perspective again now.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I think some of those trees, I think there is some of the trees still there. Some of them it's interesting because you kind of go back and you look and you see how the landscape has evolved. But it's such a magical thing to experience her photographs and then go back to encampment, which is both changed and not changed in so many different ways.
Was this her husband here?
That is her brother-in-law.
Oh, brother-in-law. Okay.
Yeah. And I got to know her family really well through looking through these pictures. And so what I did was, okay, this is like a really nerdy side of things, but I think it's really interesting. I worked with the family to donate it to the American Heritage Center with no copyright restriction, other than people who use the photographs need to say that they are used with courtesy of the American Heritage Center.
Okay.
So that's the only thing, but people can use it. They can download the images from the American Heritage Center website. They can use them for research. They can use them for whatever they want. And that was really important to me because a lot of archives are behind like paywalls. It's kind of hard to find all the work. And I didn't want Lora's archive to get kind of buried anywhere.
Yeah.
Wanted to make it more accessible. And so that was actually like, took several years, several emails, a lot of like slow, just meeting people, talking to people, work about why this was of value to like American history, women's history, photo history. So I did that, and I feel like that was like my biggest contribution in the photo world, I think, is actually like putting in the work to make that happen. And then along with it, then I've published 2 books. One came out in 2021, kind of a greatest hits of Lora's work. And then the second one, Heap of Living, is coming out in May of this year.
Oh, great.
Yeah. The first book, I really didn't know if anyone was going to care about her work. I got so many rejection letters for the book. I can't even tell you.
Oh, yeah.
so many rejection letters, and I was actually about to give up and just be like, I guess I'm the only one who cares about her images or thinks they're interesting. And then at the very, like my last attempt, I got a publisher interested from Amsterdam. And FW Books, Hans Greyman did the design of the first book. And it was so interesting because I had to get the European folks interested before I could get like Americans interested.
Oh, interesting.
Migrated over from Europe in this really interesting way. But it's been it's just a fascinating experience to see how different people can relate to her work.
Yeah. Should I click on one of these other albums here?
Sure. Go ahead and click on actually To California and Back Again, because this will give me an
Okay.
opportunity to say just a few things about it. So look, what's the first book that came out was like a greatest hits, and it was called Encampment, Wyoming.
Uh-huh.
And actually this picture's, I'm glad that it landed on this one. The first book was mostly about the town of Encampment, and I knew no one was going to know Lora's name because she was an unknown photographer. So I titled the book Encampment, Wyoming, which I thought just kind of had a mystery to it. And it's not just the work that she made, but also the work she collected from other photographers in the area. The second book that's coming out is called Heap of Living, and that traces her personal history a little bit more. So it is about her family, her children, her kind of network of female friends and family in Wyoming. But then she actually moves to Stockton, Wyoming, and Stockton, California in 1935, and solo, like leaves her husband, leaves her kids behind, moves to Stockton, and starts kind of a new life for 2 decades in the Central Valley. And the second book has more of that story. So this is the little house that she built bought. She ended up working at a children's home called the Stockton Home for Children, which is still around today. Became first a cook and eventually became the supervisor, and bought this little house. That's her son, Frank, who fought in World War II. He was at Pearl Harbor. That's his wife, Lois. And it's interesting because the second book will just be more of a personal journey of Lora's, and showing not just the kind of like, rough and tumble American West of Wyoming, but also just like those pictures sort of like this, but the pictures of the people she met on that journey, showing California through her eyes as well as Wyoming. And it's kind of an interesting part of her life that oftentimes gets skipped over now because she's so identified as this Wyoming photographer.
Okay.
But she had 2 decades of her life in Stockton. And I had a really special experience recently. So she worked at the Stockton Home for Children, and I got to meet one of the orphans that was under her care for several years. That she
that's
became
really sweet.
close with, and he still lives in Stockton. He was telling me about how Lora taught him how to make pictures and gave him his first camera, and it's been really special to kind of meet someone who knew her from that California life.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really nice moment.
Yeah, and I think that's actually the children's home there, and she would also do a lot of interiors. And so, yeah. And that's a self-portrait of her sitting.
Nice.
When she first, it's 1938. So it was when she was still pretty early relocated to California and was kind of hopping around to different couch surfing and finding places to live. She'd always take portraits of herself in the mirror.
Oh, this is the photo that we were just looking at.
Yeah, and that's Frank. Oh, I should also mention, she left behind 70 years of diaries. So
oh, really?
Yeah, it's like that's how I know all about like how Frank was in World War II, and I know all about like him and Lois's tragic divorce and like all the backstory
Yeah.
as
Oh,
well.
wow. What an interesting experience, kind of like being able to look at someone's life that intimate and being able to see the images that are being produced at the same time.
Yeah,
Do you feel like a
absolutely.
detective almost? Like
Yeah, it does feel like a detective, and it also is just a really heavy experience
Mhm,
when I
mhm,
think about how the photographs tell one story and then the written word tells something different.
mhm,
Uh, the photos are almost always full of like joy and wonder and peacefulness, and I mean, she photographed like her kids with the measles and things like
mhm.
that, but there's still always this beauty to it. And
Yeah,
then you go and you read the diaries and it's just like, oh my God, they were so poor, or she was so depressed
yeah,
or whatever. And it's like reconciling the written word with the photos is just
yeah.
kind of
Well,
makes my head spin.
well, and it kind of goes to like the way that we document our lives, the parts that we want people to see opposed to the stuff that's more private, and you
Yeah.
kind of piecing it together. That's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's been an
And
amazing project to work with.
yeah, and so the family, I can imagine they've probably been pretty excited about this.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like she doesn't have a lot of super close immediate family, but it's been like
Mhm.
these great grandchildren and great great grandchildren who've come out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
Because first Lora Webb Nichols book did actually kind of get a decent amount of publicity, both nationally and internationally. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden, I'm hearing from folks who are like, I'm related to Laura, and that's a picture of my grandpa or whatever. And so it's been amazing to kind of see how the Nichols family kind of lost connection with her
Mhm.
work and then now is coming back to it and finding their way to her story.
This is a really interesting portrait. It feels kind of contemporary in a lot of ways.
Yes. And that was her son who was on leave from the armed forces, and it reminds me of the Tim Hetherington body of work about soldiers
Mm,
sleeping, and he had that whole series, and it's sort of a nod to that in some ways when I put that on the website.
mm. This is great.
Yeah, and I
Definitely
should say too that I use a lot of my students at Cal Poly Humboldt help me do the restoration of the files. So we kind of use it as this internship research project, and they've done
Mhm.
such amazing work with like doing all levels of helping me design the website, doing the file restoration, printing
Oh,
exhibitions, things like that.
oh, that's a great experience for them.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna spend some time looking around through this because I know there's a lot here. So
Mhm.
yeah, hopefully people watching, check out the Laura Webb Nichols photography archive. And yeah, good stuff. So as we come to a close, I'm going to go ahead and let me hop out of this view. As we come to a close, I was wondering, do you have any advice for up and coming photographers? We're just talking about your students. Is there anything that you wish you'd known then that you know now? Anything like that you want to share with the audience?
I think there's just two things I always sort of think about is I sort of think about like every time you screw something up, like whether that is like making someone mad with a picture you took or didn't take, or something technical that you messed up, like when you go and do a whole photo shoot and realize you forgot to load your 4x5 film holders with film. All of that is just like a learning opportunity. And I know that sounds really cheesy, but I think I've learned so much more about the things that I've screwed up than I've done right.
Mm,
And I just like, it's like, keep that in mind. And it's
mhm,
just this, I just think about that I mean, it doesn't make those mistakes feel any better, but at the moment, but then it's like, oh, well, what can I learn from that? And I think
mhm,
that you really do learn more about the things that you mess up. And then the other thing that I would say is like, I come back to this just because when I've told people this, they're always like really shocked. But like with like the Lora Webb Nichols Archive, I got so many rejection letters for that book. And then it ended up being like really embraced by the public and is like sold out 3 editions and awesome. But I have a stack of like 35 rejection letters from that. And it's like, it's not to say like, don't also learn from rejection letters and like figure out and different rejections for shows or jobs or whatever. Like try to still learn from that and like how you can modify things. But it's like, you kind of can't, if you care about a thing, you kind of have to just find a way to like deal with the rejection and kind of go through a little stage of grief, but then like keep moving on and don't let it like get you down, because it's like, it's just part of the business of being a creative person. There's just rejection is just part of something you have to learn to live with constantly.
Oh, that's great advice. So as we close out, where do you want to tell anybody about what's coming up?
Yeah. So I think at the bottom of the screen there is the Instagram handle. And I will admit that I don't post as much as I'd like on Instagram, but I do always look at it, share stories, things like that on there as best I can. And it also then links to the Lora Webb Nichols Archive, which also has an Instagram page that's linked in my profile there. And that's kind of the big thing that's coming up next. So the second Lora Webb Nichols book comes out in May-ish. It actually just got printed this last week. So
exciting.
And so there will be a lot of posts that I make about there's going to be an upcoming Lora Webb Nichols show in Stockton, California, coming up in the fall, and in New Jersey, I think in the winter. So I'll post a lot about those events, and I'll do book signings in various places around the country too.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was great to learn about your work and learn about Lora Webb Nichols. So thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody on the next episode, and have a great day. If you enjoyed the show, please like, subscribe, and leave us a comment. It helps us connect with more photography lovers just like you.